So it's only the biggest public servant strike in Canadian history in some time, with nearly 150,000 workers out on the picket lines. And where is Justin Trudeau? Well, he's traveling. Hello, everyone. I'm Adrienne Batra. With me is Brian Lilley and Wareen Kinsella. Brian, the Prime Minister probably should be at home, probably should be doing some work, probably should be working with getting these federal workers back to work. But maybe sometimes you have to wonder, it's maybe best for him to stay out of it, because then things could go sideways. But so he's in New York. What's he doing there?
He's at a conference called Global Citizen Now, and he's been to this thing before. And it's a bunch of celebrities getting together to say that they're really concerned about issues like gender equality, which we all should be concerned about. But it's a bunch of people who all agree on it, talking about how they all agree on it, and taking photos with celebrities like Hugh Jackman or the guy from Coldplay. And, you know, you've got John Legend showing up to croon people. And does this actually accomplish anything? This is the most important thing for the PM to be doing, getting together with people he agrees with on everything to talk about how they agree on everything. Meanwhile, you've got 155,000 people out on strike. The troops at Petawawa don't have hot water for the showers. The ports in St. John and Vancouver and Montreal are being shut down by this strike. There's all kinds of problems. Oh, and we've got Canadian citizens in Sudan that we can't get out because we can't find a place to land, maybe because all the other countries are landing their planes to get their citizens out. But don't worry about any of that. JT is in New York City to hang out with celebrities for 2.5 days. All is good with the world.
You know, I sort of jokingly said at Wareen that it's probably best for Trudeau not even to be in and around the negotiations, because I mean, there's not much confidence that he would really add much value. But regardless of that, so much in the political world is about presence and just showing that you are there physically. I mean, does it even matter if he's in Ottawa or not? I mean, is it better for him to be in New York and staying out of the whole thing?
Well, you know, hate him or like him, and I don't like him. You know, he is the prime minister for the foreseeable future, but he's just phoning it in. You know, it's yet another international trip, as Brian says. And okay, Justin, you think you need to be in the United States. Fine. Why don't you actually do your job and address the issue, the threat we've got from the Biden administration, which is the most protectionist administration in my lifetime, in our lifetimes. Why isn't he using that opportunity to speak to some people, senior people in the Biden administration? And back home, we've got this strike. And for those of you who get old age security or CPP checks or veterans disability, any of that stuff, in the next few days, those are going to stop, whether you're getting them in the mail or, as I understand, by direct deposit. It is going to stop because this strike is not, they're at loggerheads. There's been no movement. I think they're barely even talking. So whether he's in the United States or whether he's in Canada, there are things that he can do as prime minister, and he's just not doing them because he's hanging out with Wareen in the Big Apple.
Brian, let's remind our viewers a little bit about what is at issue here with PSAC. What are some of the things that they are demanding? And I will say this, thus far, the Trudeau government has not capitulated. So that's worth noting today. Who knows what might happen in 24 hours. But let's remind our viewers about some of the things that are at issue here.
So if we're talking about wages, the majority of the strikers are part of the 120,000 group, and they want about 13 to 14% over 3 years wage increase. The government's offering 9 over 3 years. But there's about 36,000 tax workers, your CRA agents, you know, the people you love dealing with this time of year. They want an immediate 9% bump, followed by a pile of much higher increases over 3 years that would bring the total to a 30% increase over 3 years. That is untenable. That can't happen. Can they come up on the money side with something in between for the rest of them? Sure, probably. I don't know how you're going to bridge that gap between 9% and 30% with the folks at CRA. But, there's other wacky things that they've asked for. They want, funding for unconscious bias training. They want a $3 million a year political slush fund. This is something they've asked of every government. I think I first covered it when Chrétien was still in office. And every year they ask for it and they say, oh, it's just a penny per hour for each worker. Yeah, but it works out to $3 million a year for you to play politics using our money. No, that's off the table. So, there's some normal things in this and there's some weird things. But the one that will stick in the craw of an awful lot of people is they want it entrenched in the contract that they've got the right to work from home. A union that is telling their people, if you don't show up to the strike picket line in person, you don't get your strike pay, is striking to make sure that you can still work from home. I'm not sure how any of this makes sense, but there you have it.
Wareen, last word to you. We all know that one of the core the core reason for government is to provide service to its citizens. This government, there is very little areas of public policy you can't see where they haven't sort of messed it up. And then we have this massive strike with all the demands, which are grossly unfair to the average Canadian taxpayer because they're not in this circumstance. And they look upon those federal workers during the course of the pandemic as having not had to endure really anything financially. They still got their jobs, they got to work from home, they probably saved some money, whereas millions of Canadians weren't in that luxurious sort of position. So how does Justin Trudeau reconcile all of that? He runs around, tries to, talk about that he's there for the middle class, he's there for the people, but we know that's not true based on his travel junkets and the exorbitant amount of money that he bills taxpayers for every time his family and him go away, or he breaks a conflict of interest law. So how does the Liberal government reconcile that sort of image of wanting to be, fair to everybody and then not have this strike go on for a long time?
Well, the question to me is, what does the federal government do? What does the federal government do? It runs airports, which have been a disaster since the pandemic ended. They provide you with a passport so you can travel. That's been a disaster since the pandemic ended. They ensure that there's the speedy travel of goods across provincial borders. That also has been a mess. Supply chain. They have actually a finite number of responsibilities and they're not delivering. And as Brian said off the top, we've got hundreds of Canadian citizens begging their own government to be rescued in Sudan because they don't want to be killed. And, I don't know what the status is of those people. They're our people. They're our neighbors, our fellow citizens. So by every measure, the government of Justin Trudeau is failing. And when we look to him for some leadership or some direction, well, there he is in New York City talking to a bunch of rich people about stuff. And all I can say is thank God for Lisa Laflamme. She at least gave it to him and asked him some tough questions, which he too often doesn't allow those of us in the Canadian media to do. So shame on him and shame on his government. They're just not doing their job.
Well, sadly, Canadians are probably going to have to endure yet another Justin Trudeau Liberal fail. Log on to Facebook and Twitter. Let us know what you think and go to the TorontoSun.com. You can read Brian and Wareen's stuff on all of this and other topics and coverage you will not find anywhere else.